You're watching 17JKS Jacksonville.
September 23rd, 1996.
They're cursed, they're discounted, they're criticized. Still,
people are fascinated by them.
And politicians and the media can't do without them.
It's too much. It's too prevalent. It's too pervasive.
Tonight, what to make of the polls.
This is ABC News Nightline. The 96 votes. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Cokie Roberts.
Another week, another number. Another measure of how Bob Dole is doing in what so far seemed an impossible task, ousting Bill Clinton from the White House. This week's number gives Dole no cause for cheers. 52% of likely voters told ABC's pollsters they would back Clinton. 40% picked Dole. Only 4% named Ross Perot. And when it comes to a look at the Electoral College map, the news for Dole is even worse. It takes 270 electoral votes to win. Right now, ABC's political unit finds Clinton leading in 30 states, Dole ahead in 13 states, with 8 states even. That means if the election were held today, Clinton would have 350 electoral votes, Dole 107, with 81 too close to call. No wonder Bob Dole's not feeling too kindly toward polls these days.
I don't believe in polls. If I did, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I know the poll that counts.
Let me assure you, we are not taking anyone or anyone's vote for granted, and we know the only poll that counts is the one they take on November the 5th. I ask you to remember that and help others to remember it as well.
That's what they say, but what do they do? When it comes to the presidential debates, they abide by the Debate Commission's decision to exclude Ross Perot. On what basis? Polls. Polls that show he doesn't have a chance.
Here is the fascinating thing. Nobody knows who the Debate Commission is. It's 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans who ignored the wishes of 76% of the voters who wanted me in the debates and for political reasons froze me out.
ABC's poll shows most people do want Perot included in the debates. So how do people feel about polls that result in decisions they say they don't like? We decided to take a poll. When we asked, do you think polling is a good idea? A large majority, 86%, said yes. But when we asked the question, do you believe our polls, polls done by the news media, it came out a tie. 50% said yes, 49% no. So we thought we'd try to explain these polls to you, see what effect they might have on the candidates, the voters, and the outcome of the election when we return from this break.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Kinko's Service.
Today, I'm going to meetings in Paris, Prague, and Toledo without leaving my chair. The world is evolving and connecting at the same time. You don't even need an office. If you can think it, you can go do it in absolute full digital color. There are more ideas inside of Kinko's today than in any office space in America. Sometimes I go just to be with people.
Hi, Howard.
Every day, over 200,000 businesses use Kinko's, the new way to office.
This seems like a good time to introduce the new, more responsive Volvo 850 GLT. Drive safely.
Everyone has problems. We focus on solutions on ABC's World News Tonight.
Don't just watch the news. Use it.
We send them off to school, and we worry. Teenage drug use has doubled since 1992. And Bill Clinton, he cut the White House drug office 83%. His own Surgeon General even considered legalizing drugs. And in front of our children on MTV, the president himself.
If you had to do over again, would you inhale?
Sure, if I could. I tried before.
Bill Clinton. He just doesn't get it. But we do.
When it comes to tracking life-threatening hurricanes or planning a day at the beach, 17 First Coast News meteorologist Jeff Donald is the only weathercaster in Jacksonville with both the National Weather Association and American Meteorological Society seal of approval. 17 ABC, the only station on the First Coast that actually measures the damaging ultraviolet rays. 17 ABC also brings you Tropics Watch every day during hurricane season. Watch Jeff Donald First Coast Weather only on 17 ABC.
Some people question whether all these polls are a help, a hindrance, maybe even a downright nuisance to the voting public trying to make sense of the political landscape. Joining us now is ABC's John Cochran to help sort out some of the confusion. John?
Cokie, I suspect a poll of tonight's audience would show that many of you were around earlier watching Monday Night Football. Maybe some were even watching the Oakland game a week ago when the scoreboard was on the blink, so you could never be quite sure how much time was left in the game, making that game more unpredictable for the viewer and some thought more fun to watch. A fair question, too, is whether polls have taken some of the fun out of politics by telling us what everybody is supposed to be thinking well in advance of Election Day. A more serious charge is that polls actually affect the outcome. But the fact is, people do like polls. How do we know? Because that's what people tell pollsters like Darrell West of Brown University.
People complain a lot about public opinion surveys, but yet people are fascinated by them. They like surveys because it shows them where the race is, how the race is shaping up, who's ahead and who's behind.
Well, not everyone likes polls, certainly not Ross Perot, not when they have enough clout to help knock him out of the debates. Paul Kirk, co-chairman of the Commission on Presidential Debates, said the polls could not be ignored.
That goes right to the bottom line of our criteria. Does he have a realistic chance of being elected?
Nobody ever said life was fair.
But are polls really reliable enough to be a factor in deciding who gets into the debates? Look at some numbers last week, the week the commission was deciding. It's true Perot trailed badly in all the polls, but in the course of the week, depending on which network you were watching, Bill Clinton's lead over Bob Dole was either 8 points, or 13 points, or 16 points, or 22 points. 4 polls taken on different days with different methods. Pollsters say the results show that support for both men is soft and can change in an instant.
It's similar to, though not quite the same thing, as wavering back and forth if you're ordering a meal in the restaurant and saying to yourself, I'll have the roast beef. Well, maybe I'll have the lobster. Well, maybe the roast beef.
The part that causes that volatility, that middle group that can be swayed in a campaign, aren't particularly happy with Mr. Dole and aren't particularly happy with Mr. Clinton and haven't picked up on anybody else. So certain events, a speech by Mr. Clinton, something that Mr. Dole does, or the Republican convention, can shift those numbers fairly quickly.
Pollsters also remind us incessantly that their work carries warnings of significant margins of possible error. While networks and the print media do their own polling, so do the candidates. Unlike the media, the Clinton and Dole pollsters have come up with similar numbers, usually within 2 or 3 points of each other.
I'm often asked which is more accurate, media polling or candidate polling, and my answer is quite simple. Candidate polling. How would you like to look the candidate straight in the eye and explain why your polls were 10 points off? When people poll for candidates, it's like they've got a gun at their heads and they better get the numbers dead on or they won't be polling in the next election. Media polling, you can be off 5, 10, 15 points, and media outlets will continue to hire you.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But media pollsters say they do a good job, too.
Are you Caucasian, Afro-American, Hispanic, or whatever?
Where do they get their numbers? From calling other numbers, phone numbers. And that's where there's a chance to make errors. Some pollsters call it random. Some use lists.
We predominantly do what's called random digit dialing. And random digit dialing gets through the unlisted numbers, recent registrations.
People who have unlisted phone numbers tend to be wealthier, often much wealthier, and they don't want to be called by sales organizations, so they won't list their phone numbers. If you call off of a list, you won't be able to reach those individuals in most cases.
Of course, most people are too busy to figure out which telephone polls are reliable. But there is something you can do in deciding which polls are worthwhile. ABC News pollster Jeff Alderman says, pay attention to how the questions are asked.
Question wording is the most important source of error in polls that you can come up with. A biased question ruins the results.
A notable example. During the run-up to the Gulf War, Washington politicians were stymied when two networks came up with very different results on whether the country was ready for war. The difference was in the questions. When asked whether we should go to war immediately after President Bush's deadline expired, less than half said yes. When another poll asked whether we should go to war at some point, 2/3 said yes. The presidential race is not quite a war, but polls are still important. The Dole campaign was divided over whether he should briefly change his message from cutting taxes to bashing Bill Clinton over drugs and crime. Dole's pollsters voted for drug bashing, and they won.
I can understand why Dole would pick crime. It's one of the few issues, crime and drugs, one of the few top issues in the country where he runs competitively with the president.
But in an event-filled week, which included Dole's much-publicized fall and his less publicized but energetic and good-humored rise, as well as charges and countercharges over drugs and crime, the remarkable thing was how little changed in the polls. Clinton's lead remained about what it has been in most polls.
And pollsters say that is what we should pay attention to. Most polls, not one poll. If the race does start to change dramatically, more than one poll will reflect it. Cokie?
Well, John, you say that, but there's a group of people that's very important to the candidates who look at one or two polls and start to make important decisions. They're called fundraisers and contributors, and they make money decisions based on polls.
And they're making those decisions right about now as we go into October. If you're thinking about supporting somebody with your wallet, and your candidate is running well behind in the polls, you're certainly going to think twice. Oddly enough, we do find that people don't jump to get on a bandwagon when somebody is ahead in the polls. They don't say, I'm going to vote for somebody just because of that, and they don't stay at home necessarily just because their candidate is running behind. But when it comes down to dollars and cents, people do make decisions on probably the polls.
Thanks very much, John Cochran. When we come back, we'll talk to a political analyst about why sometimes some of these polls seem haywire.
This is about the biggest idea in business communication today. About simple being smart, less being more. About how your business can get local and long-distance calling, plus everything from paging to conferencing, global to cellular. The whole menu, soup to nuts. From one team on one bill. From the one and only company in America with the power to put it all together. Network MCI. That's how.
Someone figured out together we have 115 years working on Fords. My great-grandfather built the Model T. My grandfather built the Model A. My dad crafted the sheet metal for the Lincoln. Today I'm an engineer on the Mercury Sable and the Ford Taurus. Growing up, I was taught whatever I put my hand to must be done with the highest quality. After all, it has to live up to the family name.
Tomorrow, the controversy. Catholic schools bailing out our overcrowded public schools. Plus, Ellen DeGeneres on tomorrow's Good Morning America.
When you gotta have that jolt of excitement in the daytime.
Clear!
Shock your system and watch the Rosie O'Donnell Show. Have a grand old time with some of your favorite celebrities.
I was a genius.
Then tune in next time as Rosie gets the fun started with superstar Michael J. Fox. And from Lois and Clark, it's Superman's girlfriend, Terry Hatcher. Plus a live performance by country singer Vince Gill.
I love country music.
Finally, something different in daytime. The Rosie O'Donnell Show.
Tuesday morning at 10 on 17 JKS.
If you've been running for years,
If you've just started running,
even if you've been thinking about running, Runner's World, the world's #1 running magazine, can help you enjoy running and keep you running so you'll look and feel terrific.
Runner's World will help you lose weight fast.
And show you the foods that can boost your energy.
You'll learn secrets for building speed and stamina from top runners and their coaches.
Plus, sports medicine breakthroughs and easy stretches that help prevent injury.
You can get into fantastic shape with just 20 minutes of running 3 times a week.
Call now and receive a free issue of Runner's World.
As a special TV bonus, you'll also receive our exclusive guide,
250 everyday health tips for runners and a personal training log free.
If you're not thrilled with your first issue, simply cancel and owe nothing. If you love Runner's World, you'll receive a full year, 12 issues in all, plus your free tips book and training log for just 4 easy payments of $4.97. That's 53% off the cover price.
Call 1-800-571-1200.
ABC News Nightline, the 96 vote continues. Once again, Cokie Roberts.
Joining us now in Washington, Charles Cook, editor of the Tip Sheet, the Cook Political Report. Charlie, we've seen this past week one poll showing Bob Dole back by about 6 points, another with him back of Clinton by about 23 points. How do you account for that? The same people, presumably, or same types of people being asked the same question the same week.
I think you can get positively neurotic looking at individual polls, and I think John was absolutely right when he said, look at most polls, look at the general direction, take an average, and I think you'll have a real good idea of what direction the race is going and the general range, but individual polls can drive you crazy, and you really shouldn't put too much weight on any single poll.
And when you take an average in this election, what do you get?
Right now, it's about 16 points. President Clinton with about 51, 52%. Bob Dole with 36, 37, and Ross Perot at 5, 6, 7, something like that. What people tend to do, though, is they seize on the one poll that seems to come closest to what they want to see happen, and that's the right poll, and then they dismiss all the others as being wrong.
And that's not just the candidates, that's us as well, because we want a better story, we want a tighter race, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Would it make any difference if we just got rid of all these polls?
Well, I don't know. Somehow you got to keep score. The thing is, I think the point that was made earlier in the story about people like polls, they want to know the standing, what's going on right now, and I think it's sort of, our society is such where everything has to be measured, and so I think people like them. They have a love-hate relationship with the polls. They want the election to mean something, but at the same time, they want to hear, what does everybody else think?
Well, the candidates at least claim to not like the polls, but they spend an awful lot of money to have them.
Well, and people tend to look at candidate-sponsored polls with a jaundiced eye, but the thing is, you only hear the polls that the candidates want you to hear about. They deep six the polls that make them look bad, and so people